Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Chet Hayes, the Chief Technology Officer at Vertosoft. Chet, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, and Chet, let's start at the beginning. This is a discussion about cloud. Where is the government at from your standpoint with cloud? What are some of the trends you're seeing in terms of moving to the cloud? Of course, we've been talking a lot about a hybrid model, but where do you think we're at?
It's a great question. I think, today we've gone from on-premises to cloud first, to multi-cloud, to hybrid. And I think we're starting to see more adoption of hybrid in that model. We're starting to see a lot more agencies use cloud for mission-critical applications, whereas before I think they were using it largely for ancillary types of solutions. So there was a survey I read recently that 2/3 of the IT project managers who were supporting mission-critical applications were either looking at or were using cloud technology to support those mission-critical applications.
Yeah, and we'll have a discussion about mission-critical applications because it's not just any applications. But, and in terms of challenges when it comes to cloud adoption, of course, the list goes on in terms of security and cost, etc. But, could you talk about some of the challenges that are emerging as we're talking about this hybrid model, etc.?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple things as it relates to the overall adoption. I was going back through some notes. 10 years ago, we were working on migrating some of the very first applications with NASA into the cloud. And in some of those cases, we were doing a lift and shift approach. And we know today that that doesn't work. And so organizations who are taking that lift and shift approach are struggling in a variety of different ways. Some of them are seeing higher costs than they had anticipated. The other thing is some challenge and some concern around vendor lock-in. And so that's where that whole concept of multi-cloud came about. People wanted to be able to take advantage of the different offerings from different cloud providers, as well as some of the unique capabilities that they provided that they could get from there. So in addition to that, the challenges related to how do you break apart an existing application that was architected for maybe to run in an on-premises environment to run in that cloud environment. So it's a lot of these different piece parts that all create that grander challenge that organizations are struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it depends on the organization, it depends on the size and scale, etc. But, as they're moving towards building this robust infrastructure, as they're moving towards having, this modernized system that allows them to communicate and that is secure and that allows them to collaborate and share data, etc. What would be the best advice from your standpoint when it comes to that cloud journey, and then of course to when it comes to adopting that hybrid model?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a couple of things. One, they need to think about how to decompose the application into the parts that make sense to take advantage of the cloud native capabilities. So how do they break that up and re-architect that so it can work in the environments that are offered by the hyperscalers or other types of cloud solution providers? I think that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, I think, is thinking about how just the concept of scalability, right? The early premise of cloud, everybody was running around and saying, hey, cloud is going to allow us to be very flexible, to scale up and scale down. And one of the things that I've seen is that organizations, even today, when they move to the cloud, they are still provisioning infrastructure as if they were on premises. They will allocate a significant amount of resources just to ensure they have availability and scalability. And so they need to, I would encourage them to rethink that and think about how to take advantage of the capabilities that the cloud provides. Instead of allocating all that infrastructure up front, allocate only what you need. And there's tools and technologies, some intelligent automation capabilities that can help them manage that going forward in the future. So they get, I think, the most value in terms of what they're trying to do in the cloud.
Yeah, and we'll talk about, tools and technologies and intelligent automation, but going back to, mission applications, because again, it's not just like any application. What did you see worked, what hasn't worked in terms of incorporating those mission applications?
So taking the time to, I'll call it re-engineer, re-architect, take advantage of cloud-native capabilities, to architect with the expectation of failure. And when I say that, meaning taking full advantage of the resiliency that you would expect to have in cloud infrastructure. Being able to, the things that don't, back to what doesn't work, lift and shift.
Right.
I think everybody who has taken that approach and has gone through and said, hey, I've got this application, I'm just going to lift and shift into the cloud environment, probably one of the biggest challenges they end up seeing is, I'm going to call it the sticker shock, because they are not actually realizing true cost savings. In fact, in many cases, they were seeing higher bills for their infrastructure. And so being able to go back and rethink how those applications were architected, how they structured it, how they designed for that resiliency, for that scalability, is a little bit different when you're taking advantage of that infrastructure. The things that do work is the focus on automation, being able to think about the concept of infrastructure as code, being able to take those types of things, articulate it in some tool that supports the ability to automatically deploy that infrastructure given some configurable and managed set of instructions. That has been hugely beneficial for organizations as they try to make that move. The whole concept of CI/CD and this auto configuration has been key.
Could you talk about maybe a successful use case that you can talk about in terms of that successful cloud implementation?
As USCIS has tried to keep up with the huge demand of the immigration requests, being able to move a lot of that infrastructure into a hyperscaler, being able to go in and create these CI/CD pipelines, they were able to very quickly and effectively add and deploy new applications, new capability, new features. Instead of months and years, they were able to do it in a matter of weeks and even days. And the challenge, it could have been even faster, but the challenge they ran into at the time was just their own internal security and evaluation process to determine, hey, this can move to production and or not. So once they figured out how to automate a lot of that, they were able to accelerate their ability to get that capability out, and it made a pretty significant difference in their ability to expand and scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about automation. Could you talk about how agencies can utilize, and you mentioned intelligent automation. We talk about automation, we talk about AI. So could you talk about, just what intelligent automation is and how agencies can utilize that to optimize their cloud infrastructure?
Yeah. Going back to what we talked about in how organizations would potentially allocate or over-allocate resources and instance types. So they would be able to have that warm fuzzy, if you will, that they're both scalable and high availability. If we apply intelligent automation tools to that problem, they don't necessarily have to think about that, and these tools are smart enough that they can right-size the infrastructure for them. They can make a determination that based on whether it's this time of year or the demand I'm seeing, they can allocate and say, I need to make sure my infrastructure is running on these types of instances to handle that scale, and whether that's high or whether that's low. And so they're actually able to optimize their spend in these environments. So automation and intelligent automation has the smarts to help them do that and do that quickly and effectively. So there's definitely some good components there. The other side of that is the ability to automate policy. From a governance perspective, everybody's on the hook. We've heard about CMMC. We've got the NIST 800, 171 or 153 controls. Yeah, we've got all these controls and all these things that are required to be in place in these environments. If we think about this concept of policy as code, and we're using these intelligence automation tools, these tools can help apply policy in real time to make sure that the environment is secure, reliable, and meets all of the requirements that have been put upon them to ensure that the operational integrity is still intact.
I'm Anastasia Obis, and you're listening to the discussion Cloud Modernization, how the Defense Department balances mission readiness, cost optimization, and innovation, sponsored by Vertosoft on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the discussion Cloud Modernization, how the Defense Department balances mission readiness, cost optimization, and innovation, sponsored by Vertosoft on Federal News Network. My guest today is Chet Hayes, the Chief Technology Officer at Vertosoft. Chet, thank you again. We covered a lot. So you were talking about USCIS and like a very complex use case. So could you talk about in terms of, those complex migrations, could you talk about some of the lessons learned when it comes to, I'm thinking, I cover DoD, so of course I'm thinking about, the Defense Department. Could you talk about, lessons learned from different components trying to just wrap their hands around all these complex migrations?
Yeah, I think a lot of these things come back to a couple things. Obviously, focus on security up front. We found that organizations who were making the migration into the cloud, the ones that didn't wait to think about security, and security was built in right up front, they thought about it, it was part of their overall plan, were more successful in getting something out and deployed faster. So that was definitely a key component of that. The other thing was to start thinking about how you broke up these applications. And I think as we move away, and the industry is starting to move away from, and this might make me sound a little old, I'm gonna and date me a little bit, but the legacy behemoth VMs. So there's these large VM infrastructures, and they're trying to move over as we break that down and take more advantage of the concept of containerization. Mm-hmm. That has also been critical for organizations to both quickly migrate different components of their application into these cloud environments. At the same time, helping reduce vendor lock-in and giving them that flexibility to work in the environment that's most important from a mission perspective. So that security up front, containerization, both of those two things have been, I think, widely important in making these applications successful for the ones that have done that.
And also one thing I wanted to touch on is when I talked to the various people for this series, he mentioned that one of their challenges, and it's of course not just about the Army Corps of Engineers, is just trying to understand and wrap their mind around what do we need in terms of applications, what do we not need, how do we avoid duplication, how do we rationalize using this particular application and not using this particular application. And of course there are culture clashes in terms of someone's very used to using something. So what would be your advice in terms of addressing that particular challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we see this a lot just in the industry in general. Again, I'm a little old school, and I still think about it from the concept of people, process, and technology. If we're moving to the cloud and we're re-engineering, it's an opportunity to think about the process and how does this process actually change? And so you need to go through and have a good, solid change management plan in place. But a key component of that is understanding the people, their roles, how they're using the technology and the tool, and helping them understand how it will help them better support their mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And also something that I wanted to touch on, something that you have at Vertosoft is a Cloud Marketplace Accelerator program. Could you talk about that? And could you talk about how it's helping federal agencies streamline their procurement process? Just give us an overview of the program.
Yeah, it's been a big thing here probably in the last year. We are seeing agencies trying to figure out how to acquire some of this emerging technology that is out there, and they need it faster. They're looking for a more efficient way to acquire this stuff. And so from a Vertosoft perspective, we rolled out our Cloud Marketplace Accelerator that allows and helps us get tools, whether it's SaaS or server-based types of components, into a cloud marketplace so that an organization who is working with one of the hyperscalers and has access to their marketplace can actually buy that software through there. So it helps both sides. It helps these emerging technology companies that have very innovative technologies and solutions that the government really wants to buy. And it helps the government in that it's very much like an easy button for them to procure, because the marketplace is structured such that it is generally already on a contract, and it just requires a very simple transaction through their own cloud marketplace infrastructure that they have. So we can help these emerging technology companies get access to that marketplace faster, which translates into getting this technology into the hands of the government faster. And so that is something we've been very proud of, and we've been seeing some great success with that in the last 6 months.
Yeah, amazing. And could you talk about some of the feedback and some of those success stories?
We have one agency who is very much into changing how they go to market from their application perspective. They're all in on the concept of agile development. They're investing heavily in CI/CD processes. And they had a requirement for a tool that helped them specifically with their continuous deployment activities. And they needed a way to acquire the software quickly. They needed it in a matter of a few days. And so we've been talking with them with that, and we walked them through and showed them, given what they currently had in place, how we could use a cloud marketplace for them to easily procure that. And so a procurement that would normally have taken, probably 6 months, we were able to craft and get it all worked out, and that transacted within a matter of a week, all in. So it really is shortening that acquisition time and making it much easier on the government side as well as our software suppliers that we work with.
I mean, that's a great success story. And in terms of where do we go from here, because this is just a great solution, right? But there are still a lot of challenges when it comes to, from the government side. Where do you see this going in terms of shortening those timelines?
Yeah, there's been lots of conversation about changing that threshold and moving that up. I think that will go a long way in helping agencies buy software faster. I think in addition to the acquisition of these software tools and technology, we go back to this concept of acquiring tools and solutions to help organizations just in their overall cloud journey. So one of our partners we work a lot with is IBM. Turbonomics is a great tool back to that intelligent automation that helps organizations figure out where their cost is going and how to right-size their infrastructure. So we are seeing organizations who take advantage and acquiring those tools. They can get to them quickly through the marketplace, but then use that in their own infrastructure, are able to see significant cost savings, and I'll call it right-sizing that environment to make in the grand scheme of things.
Right. And as we're wrapping up this discussion, just a couple of things I want to touch on. First, what do you see some of the biggest opportunities for the agencies in adopting cloud technologies and, especially from the efficiency and the cost optimization perspective as we were talking about?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunities still exist. We can always do better as around optimization and managing the cost, making sure we've right-sized the environment. I think that is critical. But at the same time, the ability to re-architect and build these applications in a cloud-native way so that they can be deployed into whatever infrastructure is appropriate to support that mission. So back to this concept of hybrid and being able to break these out into these, componentize these parts of the application. And I'm going to use the term container, that's probably the current word of the day, and being able to quickly deploy these containers into whichever environment meets the needs of the mission of that at that time. And that takes both into consideration cost, security, and at the end of the day, the end goal of what that application is trying to do.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about your Cloud Marketplace Accelerator program. Anything else that's in the works at Vertosoft?
A lot of good things coming up. We're seeing a lot of demand for license management, secure software downloads, a big buzzword, software bill of materials, secure supply chain. We've got some great things coming down the pipe that will be able to help organizations, both our suppliers, be able to be compliant with the existing mandates around their SBOM components, but at the same time being able to ensure, or to help these government agencies have a warm fuzzy, if you will, that when they are acquiring the software, that the overall supply chain of that software is secure. So we're pretty excited about those things that we're going to roll out this year.
All right, perfect. A lot of exciting things down the pipeline. Thank you so much, Chet, for joining me today.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank today's guest, Chet Hayes, the Chief Technology Officer at Vertosoft. I'm reporter Anastasia Obis, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Vertosoft.